These are in no order. They're just the order I've got them in my hand, so I haven't shuffled them or anything, or rearranged them. How do recent changes in forex rates, euro to dollar and dollar to pound, affect North Sea exploration and production? That's a good friendly one to start with. Chris, do you want to start with that one?
I think from the exploration point of view, it's too short-term a cycle to have an impact yet. We're thinking about things we're going to be drilling, pricing the cost of a well a year down the line, so we're much more concerned with rig rates than forex issues.
Right, fine. Either of the other panellists take a different view, or you? No, Geoff the same. Mike, anything you want to come in on that?
I think the only thing I'd add is actually a slightly more surreal one about pricing. As the pound falls against the dollar, petrol gets more expensive at the pump. And as we know, in 2011, that caused us some problems then. And generally, every time our industry comes on, they ask, what's that going to do for the cost of petrol? So it's out with the normal operating game for most companies in this room, but that bigger price dollar-pound exchange rate is a real big issue for us as an industry.
Yeah. Fine. So moving on, it all looks very positive, but where will all the new people come from to deliver this growth in the North Sea? So, Geoff, shall we start with you on that one?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's the biggest challenge that I see in our business, retaining the good people that we have and attracting the new people that we somehow need to convince to come and be part of the joint venture company. I think we are looking at all possible routes to solve this problem. We're looking at taking people from the forces to work in our offshore and onshore organizations. We're looking at increasing graduates coming into the business, but of course it takes a few years before a bright young graduate becomes really valuable to the business. And then of course it's a challenge as they get to that 5-year milestone of experience to keep them engaged in a staff role and not have their heads turned by frankly, exorbitant consultants' rates that they can go and work as a night drilling supervisor on a rig. And that worries me because I think we need to work on deep competency in our operational leaders. We can't afford to have people who have had a smattering of training and then go and earn money running big high-risk operations. We need to have people who are 10, 15, 20 years experience, deeply competent, well-trained, and know how to deal with a potential Macondo or heaven forbid, a Piper Alpha situation. So we're just continuing to look at all possible routes to solve that people question.
Thanks, Geoff. Mike, do you want to come in on? We talked a lot about the financial resources. What about the most important resource, the human resource?
I think Geoff highlights many of the opportunities. I know even for our own humble organisation, there was always a creative tension with trying to retain staff ourselves. And we look to see that, we recognise it's one way of growing new opportunities for other people, but we are still quite keen to develop our own staff base. I've certainly spoken in the last year with the armed forces on a few occasions on both the opportunities within our industry and try to encourage them to think on it. There's also much greater focus, I think, on effectiveness and efficiency. More people, both remote working and recognising that mature individuals still have a lot to play in the future of the North Sea.
And Chris, what about you? How are you sort of facing the staffing up challenge for Cairn coming into the North Sea?
Yeah, again, from an exploration perspective, that's a central issue, and it's really about quality of staff as well. I mean, I think we believe there's perhaps 40 or 50 people in the North Sea who are really driving the ideas that have found the large majority of the oil over the last 10 years or so. And of course, there's a demographic risk both in terms of people leaving the industry to retire, but also moving to other basins. I think it's no surprise that there's been such success for British independence around the world recently, and a lot of those people cut their teeth in the North Sea and have now left the basin. So that is a concern for us, and also I wonder if we're always training the graduates in the right way. I mean, the new technological advances, it's obviously important to learn them, but are we forgetting some of the basic things, being able to look at a bag of ditch cuttings and work out if the mud logger was wrong, and that could turn over the idea that creates a new prospect or play. So yeah, it's an issue we're really occupied with, and the market, both here and Norway, is extremely tight for the good people.
Yeah. I saw the other day, the unemployment rate in Aberdeenshire is 1.3% or something. I talked about collaboration, here's a question about collaboration. How can we work more collaboratively to access reserves not connected to hubs? That's a good one, think about that. How can we work more collaboratively to access reserves not connected to hubs? Mike, do you want to start with that one?
It's a difficult one because there's always going to be that commercial tension between the guy with the opportunity and the guy with the hub and the infrastructure. Undoubtedly, we have to find ways to give the person seeking to develop the opportunity clarity and certainty over the long term. And in many cases, the infrastructure won't support that opportunity on its own. It needs a cluster of opportunities to stay open long enough to develop the full life of that field and just keep the whole of that hub going. And I think you can't beat a lot of activity and a desire to deliver the future. And frankly, trying to find a way for operators to not skin the life out of that person wanting to make that development. So a balance between short-term reward, even for the operator, and longer-term opportunity by seeing more business go across that hub.
Thanks. Geoff, you got any thoughts about where collaboration could come in here?
I agree with Mike's comments. I think we're doing some work as part of Oil and Gas UK board with Jonathan Roger in the lead and supported by Una Werngren, looking to be fitter and stronger in terms of infrastructure code of practice. One of the interesting reflections I have is that we have, as an industry, some really good legal people and some really good commercial people. And those really good legal and commercial people can sometimes be the blockers themselves in terms of maximizing optimized infrastructure use. And I think we have a role as industry leaders to encourage pragmatic commercial and legal solutions to enable third parties to come across our infrastructure. So I think it's a leadership challenge, actually.
Yeah. Chris, any thoughts on this?
I think the holy grail for us, at least, is the development of some kind of mini standalone technology that can sweep up the countless numbers of very small accumulations. I think the challenge faced, it certainly needs integration. I think to make an investment case, you need a kind of E&P arm that can secure sufficient number of opportunities, and then the technology arm to develop it. I think the big challenge looking at third-party investors is that the kind of investor that will invest in E&P opportunities is not the same kind of investor that will invest necessarily in the technology development because of the difference in returns and the difference in timescale. So it will need industry involvement, I think, to get that going. Yeah.
Geoff mentioned the work that's been going on. It's actually in pilot with under the leadership of Jonathan Roger. And for all Oil and Gas UK members, I should mention that there'll be a report back in April at our council meetings, our contractor and our operator council meetings, on the progress there. There's been very good progress there, and the report is a very, very interesting one, and we need to now make sure that it's well shared with the industry. And it is looking at some groundbreaking ideas for tackling some of these issues too. Back to tax. The high level of investment in the UKCS is positive news. However, does the panel agree that a long-term stable tax regime remains critical? Mike?
I thought that might come in my direction. You can't beat a bit of stability, it's wonderful stuff. And from the industry point of view, the last few years, yes, we keep commenting on the impact, but I know even international companies who are looking at the UK, the echoes of the last tax change are still reverberating, be it around China and be it around other parts of the Far East. So it takes a long time for a bad smell to go. We need to have the stability, we need the certainty. And we also need to be clear about the direction of travel. What the government is tacitly signalling is that as the base matures, it will tax some things less because it needs more of it to come out of the ground. So the direction of travel, certain on the direction of travel, and be confident that where we're going. And that is in governments, that's the only thing government can do to make this industry successful. It can't drill wells, it can't operate facilities, but it can create a business regime which is attractive to the long term.
Fine. Geoff?
Yeah, fiscal stability, tax predictability are absolutely vital. I think that I have never seen the government more engaged with industry. I'm very, very encouraged with the level of attention that the industry is getting from senior government officials. In the last 3 months, I've met with John Hayes, the Energy Minister. Last week, I met with a member of the Treasury team and had an engagement with the First Minister. The level of engagement and interest is extremely positive, and I think we need to make sure that continues.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point too. It's both the UK and the Scottish Government, and they're collaborating with one another, which is also extremely good to see the Scottish Government's involvement in pilot, for example. Chris?
Yes, of course, stability is critical, and we are encouraged by the more recent events last year. I think there are lessons to be learned from the way Norway manages its oil and gas resources, and particularly the joined-up government, whereby tax changes, there is good consultancy between the equivalent of DEC and the technical and commercial people who can understand the implications before their finance department dares to implement them. So it's not a case of a sudden tax change and then the negative results are demonstrated by the resultant industry performance. It's joined-up government, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. Okay, this is the way they come, and we shouldn't avoid controversy. Geoff, I'm going to start with you on this one. Why doesn't the industry start doing more to improve the transport infrastructure in Aberdeen and modernise the city?
I agree. Why don't they? I think we have enough challenge in our running our day-to-day business without getting involved in infrastructure. I think we are way behind where we should be as a city, as a European headquarters of the oil and gas industry. Our infrastructure is not nearly good enough. It needs to get better quickly.
Yeah, Chris, coming back to Aberdeen, what's your reflections on this?
I must say, as an outsider, I've never lived here. For a small city, it's not the easiest to get around, as I'm about to find out with a mad dash to the station. But having said that, I've lived in Rome for 3 years, so I've got quite a high level of tolerance for bad infrastructure.
We should mention, by the way, at the very end of the panel, Chris has got a dart for the door because he's hoping to get a 9:52 train. Good luck, mate. All right. Mike?
I think the only thing I'm going to say is thank God we haven't got trams in Aberdeen anymore.
Okay. Right. What can the UK do to compete with Norway? Sorry, Chris, I'm going to start with you again on that one. And then we'll go to Geoff. And then what can we do to compete with Norway?
I think from an exploration point of view, the big advantage that we have is still a relatively high per barrel value of our oil, which makes companies who are interested in the return, it makes even small projects more interesting than they are in Norway. As mentioned, the fiscal side is important. I think rig rates are becoming a serious problem. As I said in the talk, although historically wells in the UK have been significantly cheaper, that gap is closing. And I think ultimately, and we touched on this earlier, it's about getting access to the best people with the best ideas. I mean, we can't keep blaming the Treasury and blaming the geology of the basin for poor exploration results. It's also the ability of the industry to put enough human resource on and give them the space to generate the ideas. It's also
very good,
very,
very challenging thoughts. So, Geoff, do you want to come in on that? No, you're okay. Right. With the Central North Sea being kingpin in production terms and the most affected area in terms of the helicopter availability, what's the likely short-term impact of activity in production on activity in production? And what more can we do collaboratively to mitigate the risk? Geoff, I mean, I know this is dear to your heart, so you'd like to lead on that?
Yeah. So the impact of the helicopter, the ongoing helicopter situation where the EC225 is unavailable to fly is huge. In terms of the impact on my business, I have for the last 3.5 months been flying at about 50% of the capacity that I need to run the business efficiently and effectively. We have prioritised our safety critical work to be carried out and of course continued, which means that we've been doing production critical activities less frequently, and in fact some activities have been pushed out to later in the year. It's very difficult to quantify the exact impact on production, but it has had a big impact on my business. In terms of what we're doing to collaborate, I think the work that Oil and Gas UK have facilitated, the Helicopter Safety Steering Group, which is of course an important part of step change in safety, are all playing a really important role in making sure that as an industry our response to the helicopter outage is well coordinated and efficient. I think we're continuing to have challenging conversations amongst operators, amongst helicopter operators, involving the workforce and the unions to ensure that we're continuing to do the best we can with limited resources. I think we're continuing to work with Eurocopter as an industry to really understand how we get these helicopters flying when it's safe to do so. We're not going to rush, and the Helicopter Safety Steering Group are the body that we've charged as an industry to assess when it's safe to start flying again.
Fine, thanks very much. If I may, I'm going to move on. I can see if I can get the last two questions in. Chris, I'll ask you this one. Does the panel feel that there are undiscovered fields such as Johan Sverdrup level waiting to be discovered in the UKCS? You see another Johan Sverdrup there in the UKCS?
I think, oddly enough, if there was one, it's more likely to be there than in Norway, which is counterintuitive, I think. I believe that will be the last real giant in the North Sea sector. It was essentially discovered in 1969, really, the first well, a kind of living fossil of a discovery. But that play concept is very applicable to areas that have been written off a long time ago. So, and there are some aspects of the geology that do exist on the UK side that have not been fully explored. So, of course, like everybody else, we are seeing if we can find another one.
Very good. One last question, if I might. This is the final one. What one thing can the UK government do to drive a sustainable upturn in exploration? Should we come along quickly? Quick answers. Mike, do you want to start? And then Geoff, and then Chris, very quickly.
I think I struggle to suggest one thing other than keep going with what they're doing already, which is give the industry the space to deliver. And if you can get some more drilling rigs in there on the way, that's great.
I like the Norwegian government's approach on tax incentives. I think that's extremely powerful. Immediate hit, you drill it, you get the money back. I like it.
Chris?
Me too. That's a great system. I think other than that, just being very responsive. So when the industry, when, for example, the average field size does drop, that they respond quickly in terms of whatever incentives they can provide to ensure that we don't have one of these gaps in the industry where nothing's happening.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, I had to bring it to a close there. Could you, I hope you agree with me, those were three sparkling presentations and a great panel session. Could you please join with me in the only thanks I'll get, actually, so please put your hands together and thank this panel for that. Good luck.